I recently saw Inside Out 2, and I hate to be that guy again, but I had mixed emotions about it. I want to make it clear first of all that I didn't hate it. As a follow-up to the first movie, I thought it was fine, but I'm seriously bewildered by all the high praise the movie's been receiving. And although this is a very spur-of-the-moment video, like the Toy Story 4 and Incredibles 2 videos I made,
You know the ones I mean.
I've had some pretty in-depth thoughts about the movie since seeing it, and I want to talk about them. Now, obviously, since this movie is relatively new, I'm kinda restricted to using clips from trailers, but I'll also be using clips from the first movie throughout, just to save on reusing the same clips over and over.
Good idea.
I'm not expecting a lot of people to agree with me on this one, and that's fine. I just want to mention some stuff that I've not seen others talk about. Like I say, it didn't make me angry or anything, but much like Riley in this movie, it didn't make me feel much joy.
Are you sure we want to do this?
In we go.
Okay, going in, yes!
First of all, you probably want to know what I think of the first movie.
No. Atta girl.
Well, I'm one of apparently very few people who's not the biggest fan of it.
So that's how you want to play it, old man?
I think overall it's a good movie, but there are some issues that I've never been able to get past. I know it's been said before, but I always had an issue with the rather reductive presentation of Riley's personality, shall we say, dividing it into several islands. I understand you have to simplify it for a general audience, but some parts seem a little oversimplified to me. I mean, come on, Goofball Island, really? I think the overall message is solid. I like the inclusion of Bing Bong, the imaginary friend, and his eventual inevitable demise is well executed, and is the only part that packs an emotional punch for me.
Take her to the moon for me.
Ugh, I've just got something in my eye. Ugh, it's really emotional. Well, until this line anyway.
I'll try. Bing bong.
Yeah, okay, now you just friggin' ruined it. It's hard to explain why I feel so disconnected from this movie otherwise. Why I don't feel the same level of emotion that other viewers claim to experience. The best way I can explain it is that there are several things that just come off as too surreal, that they kinda ruin the vibe.
I would die for Riley.
I find the scene in which Joy uses a stack of duplicates of Riley's imaginary boyfriend to get back to headquarters to be really, well, weird actually. Like, I know it's played for laughs and all, but getting back to headquarters is the main goal, and it's achieved in such a surreal way that just takes me out of the movie. There are sequences that I've always felt are far cleverer than they are amusing, like the abstract thought sequence. I get why people would see this as creative, but for me it kinda has this surreal self-awareness that makes me feel detached from the movie to some degree. It just feels as though the writers are showing off their intellect and creativity in a way that's really pretentious and distracting. Put it this way, it feels like very well-executed filler to me. It doesn't really serve much purpose, and it's just too on the nose to be funny. Which I guess is something this guy wouldn't know anything about. Anyway, despite these issues that I have, I want to make it clear that I still enjoy this movie.
I love that one.
While most people seem to rate it as one of Pixar's best, I would say it's a solid 7 out of 10. I understand that's not the general consensus, but seriously, I don't get masterpiece vibes from this movie. I like it, it's decent, but I don't rate it as highly as some of their earlier films. Honestly, I'm not kidding. I'd take A Bug's Life over this movie any day of the week.
Thanks. You're sweet. You're wrong, but sweet.
Like I say, I know I'm in the minority here, so I'm not expecting everybody to agree with me.
His facts and opinions look so similar.
Don't worry about it. Happens all the time.
In any case, I was still curious to see the sequel. Inside Out 2 promised to be a mature continuation, with Riley entering her teens and going through puberty, which I think was an interesting and logical move. But I have major issues with the execution. I really wanted to love this movie, but it doesn't even come close to the first in my opinion. The movie sees Riley and her friends invited to an ice hockey camp, just prior to their transition to high school. Riley desperately wants to make the Firehawks team, and along with the revelation that her friends will be attending a different school to her, she's overwhelmed with an influx of new emotions.
I'm anxiety. Where can I put my stuff?
We also see the establishment of Riley's sense of self, comprised of memories and feelings that help form beliefs.
I'm a winner.
New emotion anxiety essentially hijacks Riley and attempts to establish a new sense of self, deciding that she needs to change Riley to establish and maintain new friendships with the team.
We are suppressed emotions!
Now, my first issue is with the emotions themselves, and I have quite a bit to say. Riley's teenage tumult sees the arrival of new emotions, embarrassment embarrassment, ennui, envy, and most importantly, anxiety. Firstly, the character designs are a little hit and miss for me. I like the designs of ennui and embarrassment especially. They easily connote what they're all about, both in terms of their physical appearance and their respective colour palettes. Embarrassment perfectly encapsulates bumbling awkwardness, while ennui conveys a brooding, disdainful embodiment of teenage lethargy. I don't really have any issues with either of these, although if I'm being nitpicky, ennui bears a vague resemblance to fear in that they're both tall, skinny, and purple. But this is really pushing it as a criticism, as they're nonetheless easily distinguishable. Envy, meanwhile, has an odd design to me. I get the impression that the large eyes are supposed to convey being in perpetual awe of someone, but I don't know, she just comes off as too cutesy to me. I would also hazard a guess that they probably intended her to be green, as in the expression green with envy, but with disgust already representing that colour, they went with a vaguely similar turquoise, which is fine, I guess, but I can't help but feel that the visual representation of the emotion is a little tenuous here. She just doesn't instantly scream envy, if you catch my drift. But as for the most prominent new emotion, anxiety, I'm somewhat conflicted. The massive panicked eyes, worrisome grin, and wild frayed hair do indeed convey a sense of uncertainty and dread, but at the same time, she kinda looks like she was drawn by children. I don't know, something about her design just feels like she doesn't belong with the others, but overall, the designs are largely okay. My biggest issue with these characters is their existence generally. With the raging onslaught of puberty, I understand why they would be more prominent at this stage of Riley's life, which explains their moving into headquarters, but it's a little weird to me that their existence was completely unknown prior to this.
Like, why does embarrassment just suddenly exist? You mean to tell me Riley has never been majorly embarrassed before the age of 13? Even anxiety should be a more prominent emotion by this point, surely.
In my opinion, the reason these emotions didn't exist before this movie is because they weren't really necessary. Now, it could be argued that the first movie is overly simplistic in its conveyance of emotions. In reality, it's obviously not as basic as 5 emotions in your head, and there's also the issue of there being crossovers with the emotions. Disgust, for example, contains elements of anger and sadness in there. But on the whole, I think the writers did a good job condensing the most prominent emotions into these characters. In fact, I think the only one I've ever had an issue with is disgust. The way I see it, the others represent more lasting, definitive emotions, while disgust is more of a transient, circumstantial response to something external.
It's broccoli!
Like, if you ask someone how they're feeling, they may say they're happy or sad, but it's very unlikely they'll tell you they're flat out disgusted. Admittedly, I'm probably overthinking this. I don't really have a major problem with her. I like her design and judgmental, condescending personality, and she's largely played for laughs anyway.
It's obvious that the filmmakers purposely whittled it down to these 5 emotions to prevent it from being overcrowded and superfluous. The existence of these new emotions just makes me wonder how many are going to manifest over time, and where do you draw the line?
In terms of what they represent, some of the new emotions bear a resemblance to the old ones. Anxiety and fear would surely share some common ground.
Okay, you and I are gonna be friends.
One of my biggest issues with this movie is the fact that there are too many characters, and what annoys me the most is that there are ways they could have been more involved in the plot. Disgust, fear, and anger are largely pushed into the background, simply because they exist, and in this movie, they don't really have a reason to. It's kind of like all the toys in the minivan in Toy Story 4. They're just kind of there.
Hey, watch it, buddy.
They could easily have incorporated scenes in which the old emotions are paired with the new ones to help understand their perspectives. Disgust and envy would probably have been an interesting duo, for example. They're both emotions that pertain to self-image, and in a coming-of-age movie, this could have been an interesting aspect to explore. Envy could be like, ooh, I want to be friends with those guys, and disgust could be like, ew, no, we don't want to be seen with them. They could bounce off each other, reinforce each other, but instead, nothing is actually done with envy, and as a result, I think she represents one of the worst aspects of the movie, in the sense that she serves little to no purpose. I don't actually recall an instance when Riley is especially envious. There are times she shows admiration, such as towards hockey player Val Ortiz, whom she desperately wants to impress, but there aren't any scenes that convey flat-out envy to me, or at least nothing substantial that has any bearing on the narrative. I genuinely don't understand why envy is here at all. By far, of all the emotions, she has the least screen time. For a good portion of the movie, I genuinely forgot she existed. At least the other emotions serve a purpose. Admittedly, ennui is little more than a plot device. Ennui has a phone, meaning they have portable access to the console to control Riley. This comes into play late in the movie, but other than this Chekhov's gun moment, ennui is just kinda there as well.
Although I suppose it's in character for ennui, it could be argued that her inactivity is kind of the point.
One other thing that bothers me about the movie is that there's a distinct lack of innovation compared to the first installment. There's not a lot that's new. The settings feel largely the same, and it feels a lesser experience. As such, the movie's pacing feels slow to to me.
It's what you would call the boredom.
Aside from the sense of self, this new place in Riley's mind that turns memories into beliefs, I don't remember many new locations explored inside Riley. Much of the movie feels like a retread of the first. In the first movie, joy and sadness have to make their way back to headquarters, while the remaining emotions are left in control. In this movie, all of the emotions from the first movie have to essentially make the same journey, after anxiety removes them from headquarters. Only it doesn't work nearly as well. The first movie contains moments when joy starts to recognize sadness's qualities, bonding moments, emotional moments. The sequel is lacking these, and therefore lacks the emotional driving force that made the first movie so appealing, not to mention that it's visually very similar. The most innovative scene is one in which the emotions are imprisoned in the memory vault, where they meet Riley's favourite childhood TV characters Bloofy and Pouchy, as well as Lance Slashblade, a video game character who Riley used to have a crush on. This scene is visually impressive, with the TV characters being traditionally animated, and the latter having visible polygons, giving off a low-res feel, typical of old video games. While visually creative though, I thought the sequence a little surreal. It's creative and entertaining, but the characters just don't sit right with me. It feels like a weird crossover rather than an extension of the Inside Out universe. It just feels as though the creative team behind the movie were trying too hard.
You want to make a movie crossing video game characters with the real world? Then do that. This just feels weird, gimmicky, and out of place to me.
One thing that I think also contributes to my general disenchantment with the movie is that the stakes aren't very high. At least in the first movie, Riley runs away from home, and it feels as though there's an element of danger. Here, not a lot seems to happen in the real world. When the movie was sold as a coming-of-age movie, I did imagine it would focus on something more substantial than ice hockey camp. What Riley goes through in this movie, her yearning to be liked and her separation from her friends, is relatable to everyone, but it doesn't really amount to much. It would possibly have helped to have more focus on Riley's friends, as their separation didn't really affect me greatly. I don't really feel as though we really got to know them, so the ending when they forgive her and bury the hatchet just feels a little rushed and flat to me.
One thing I initially appreciated is that Joy's character arc from the first movie is acknowledged. There are subtle moments when she openly embraces Sadness's presence, and this is a nice thing to see as it shows they're acknowledging her character development. But at the same time, I also felt that Joy's character was a little bit inconsistent.
At the very beginning of the movie, we see Joy purposely rejecting negative memories from influencing Riley's sense of self, which to me implies she's still imposing the same toxic positivity she did previously. She might have learned to embrace sadness, but otherwise she doesn't seem to have changed a great deal.
I know we're talking about memories in this movie rather than emotions, but surely it's the same principle. You have to take the good with the bad.
Overall, I would say the movie is a decent follow-up, albeit messy and a bit of a retread. As is the case with many other Pixar sequels, it feels like nostalgia baiting, in that the plot isn't too dissimilar from the first, despite the addition of the puberty angle. Narratively, the pacing feels slow and it seems to lag in parts. As I say, I think more time should have been devoted to some of the emotions, as they don't get chance to shine. Conversely, envy should probably have been cut entirely. I think the movie would have been more interesting if it had depicted Riley's transition to high school, rather than this hockey camp interim period. I appreciate the reasons why they focused on this, as Riley wants to make the team and her friends are transitioning to a different school, reinforcing her anxiety, but the setting just feels like it's lacking. So yeah, I'm sorry, but this movie just doesn't do it for me. I appreciate the messages the filmmakers were trying to convey, but there are so many missed opportunities and oversights. I enjoyed seeing it once, but I wouldn't be in a hurry to see it again. You might say my emotions about this movie are a little conflicted.
If you thought this movie was a masterpiece, then that's great. But for me personally, I thought it was an average sequel, inside and out.